Alice falling down the rabbit hole. Alice falling out past what you know. Keep your eyes wide, stay in the glow. Alice falling, let the secrets show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alice Falling podcast. I'm your host, Tammy, and with me, as always, is my awesome co-host, Dave. Dave, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. Excited to be here with our guest
Why
today.
are you so excited today?
Well, tell them about our guest.
Well, today we have investigative journalist, author, and director of Epstein Justice with us, Nick Bryant. Nick, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you.
So Nick, as you know, we are a Canadian podcast. So I want to just give you a minute to kind of tell everybody in Canada who exactly you are.
I've been an investigative journalist for a number of years. I was originally an academic, and I started to moonlight as a journalist in the 90s. And I left academia and moved to New York City. I'm from Minneapolis. I left Minneapolis and moved to New York City about 30 years ago. And I've been a freelance writer, investigative journalist. And about 3 years ago, I started a nonprofit organization called Epstein Justice. And I'd written a lot about Epstein. And what we want with Epstein Justice is what we're seeing now is a dog and pony show in Washington, D.C. And what we want with Epstein Justice is an independent congressional commission. An independent congressional commission can decouple itself from politics and devote itself to an investigation that's unimpeded by the political will of our politicians. And that is the only way we're going to have any kind of justice with Jeffrey Epstein. An independent congressional commission, it's very simple what we want. An independent congressional commission would have two objectives. The first objective would be, why did our government cover up child trafficking? And the second objective would be to prosecute the perpetrators. Very simple baseline morality.
And so in regards to that, because I mean, I think at this point, you know, we've in terms of what's happened with the Epstein case, I think we've kind of talked it to death via the media and, you know, all sorts of Netflix specials and everything like that. But, you know, obviously we're all aware that there is some political involvement. How do you see that playing out?
Well, as I said, Epstein Justice is up against, I think, two big hurdles. The first hurdle is Americans have been conditioned to think that they can't make a difference. And the second big hurdle is the right thinks the left is mentally ill and the left thinks the right is mentally ill. So you've got these two conditioning factors. When actually the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Biden administration, and the Trump administration, they've all covered up Epstein, all of them. So the cover-up has been bipartisan, and it's not a partisan issue. It's an issue that transcends politics. And until we can get out of the political arena with an independent congressional commission, we're not going to have any luck whatsoever with getting justice in the Epstein case.
I agree very much with you on that. I think politics has to be kept away from it, and I think there needs to be just some honest people that really start to heavily look into this. Because I posted on X today. It's been 2,211 days since Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested for trafficking hundreds of kids to seemingly nobody. The fact that there's been no justice served whatsoever is mind-boggling to me, and it's obvious at this point. I think that they're covering things up. I want to give you some time to talk about Epstein Justice a little bit more in depth, but I want to keep it fresh in people's minds. So I want to hit that kind of towards the latter half of the episode. You've done a lot, and I've been following you for a while, and have read your books, and a few of the books, anyways, and listened to a lot of your podcasts. One of the things that I really, really liked that you've done is your book, The Franklin Scandal. So let's start there.
So the Franklin scandal is what got me into all this. And I was pitching an editor stories in New York, and he said, pitch me dark stories. And I kind of, threw it Nazis, Satanists, I mean, how dark do you want to go? And I'd written about some very dark things. So he apparently thought that I was a good guy to write about dark stories. And then he had that little glitter in his eye, and he said, Satanists. So I had a simple plan. And whenever anybody says they have a simple plan, then it's going to get problematic. I had a simple plan. I was going to meet some Satanists. I was going to talk to them. I was going to go to a black mass. I was going to write an article, and then it was going to be an easy payday. But when you're writing about subjects, and other writers will corroborate this, you're always looking on the periphery for tangential stories that might be related to what you're writing about. And I came across a cult called the Finders. And there were two Finders, and they were in the cult. The Finders had a warehouse in Washington, D.C., yeah, and also a house. But there were two Finders in Tallahassee, Florida, and they had 6 kids. And the kids were ragamuffins. And a couple of concerned citizens called the police, and the police took one look at the kids and then one look at the adults who were dressed in nice suits. And they arrested the adults and arraigned them on multiple counts of child trafficking, and then put the kids in protective custody. And a doctor had said that 2 of the kids showed signs of sexual abuse. So when this went down, the Washington, D.C. police called the Tallahassee police and said that we've been looking into the Finders for quite some time. We've heard that there's child abuse and also an unsolved murder. And at that point, U.S. Customs got involved because I think that there might have been some child abuse material in the van. And so U.S. Customs and then the D.C. Police Department executed a search warrant on the Finders warehouse. And they found that there was a lot of pictures of naked children and pictures of other unsavory things. And there was a telex about the Finders buying 2 kids in Hong Kong. I mean, it was kind of a house of horrors. And the lead investigator was Ramon Martinez, and he was with U.S. Customs. He was a U.S. Customs agent. And they found all this incriminating material, and nothing was happening. So he went to the D.C. police, and he said, what's going on? And the D.C. police officer said that the Finders had become a CIA internal matter, and that was the end of the investigation. So, the CIA is not supposed to operate in the United States. I mean, that's never stopped them, but their mandate is not to operate in the United States. And they've certainly partaken in some nasty experiments in
yes,
Canada.
they absolutely did.
Sorry, did it come out that a bunch of them just got let go after they found out that it became a CIA matter?
Yes, the kids were eventually repatriated with the cult, and then the two guys were let out of jail.
Now,
Unbelievable.
And and that blew my mind. That because I kind of thought I knew how the world worked, and I was shocked that document, that U.S. Customs report, really shocked me, because that was not the world that I had. It was not. It was a different paradigm.
yeah.
Than the paradigm that I was living in. So my quest to understand that document, there was a network that was, there was a lot of internet innuendo about a network like that was in Omaha, Nebraska. And at this point, the magazine wants nothing to do with me. Because I've shown them the finder's report, and the guy said, "Well, Nick, I'd really like you to stick with the the original story." But I that's one of my problems as a journalist. I don't like to stick to the original story. So I went to Omaha, and I was a little skeptical. I knew that something had gone down in Omaha, but the big picture was that this was a CIA operation too, and that it was connected to DC, to a powerful lobbyist in DC called Craig Spence. And he had a mansion that was ready for audiovisual blackmail, and that's where a lot of these parties went down, with these pedophilic parties. And I went to, and that the feds had covered this up. And I went to Omaha knowing that something had gone down, but I was somewhat skeptical of the rest of the narrative. And then when I was in Omaha, I started talking to people, and I got some documents. And I talked to a victim, and I got to one of the blackmail photographers. And I talked to someone who worked in Child Protective Services in Omaha. And what she told me was horrific. And I talked to an attorney that represented some of the victims, and what he said was really horrific. But what really got me was these people were terrified of, and this had been covered up. The network ran through the 1980s, and it had been covered up in the late 80s, early 90s. So, and I was there in 2002, 2003, and people were terrified to talk about this. It was like I was writing an expose on the KGB in Stalinist Russia. I mean, I was pretty stunned by it. And then I was followed. I caught someone following me, and they were initially subtle, but then once I caught them following me, they weren't so subtle. And I had a death threat my last night there. So I came back to New York, and I had a mentor. He's since passed away, but he was a wonderful guy. And we were walking through Washington Square Park, and I was freaked out at this point. I was looking for snipers on the roof, and I mean, I said, Jerry, man, it's all true. I mean, they were flying kids around. It's connected to intelligence. The feds covered it up. They were plundering Boys Town, blackmail. It's true. And then we sat down on a park bench, and he was just a wonderful guy. I loved him as much as I can love anybody. And he said, Nick, this is going to be a dangerous story, and if you don't want to pursue this, I won't have any. It won't diminish my respect for you. And I said to him, a lot of kids were destroyed with impunity. According to state and federal law enforcement, not a single child was abused by those people. So I think I got to do this. I got to go for it. And I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't do everything that I possibly could. So that was my 7-year odyssey to write the Franklin Scandal.
It is one of my favorite books now. It's absolutely horrific what happened there, and I struggle. I was actually listening to it again, knowing that you were coming onto the podcast, and I still find that I struggle hearing the story of it and what was done to some of those kids. And I think the hardest part is knowing that intelligence knew or was involved and did nothing. And it seems to be a common theme. And when you mentioned the finders, did you ever look into, because I have heard this, but there was a woman apparently that was part of the finders who had actually worked for the CIA back in the 50s. Were you aware of that?
Well, Marion Petty was the guru of the finders. He was head of the cult. And his wife worked for the CIA.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
It seems like they're always having their hands involved, their hands in these things. And then there's always seemingly always a connection to politics. And what's your take on that? Why do you think that is?
The blackmail photographer that I got to for the Franklin Scandal, because you don't read about this stuff in a book. And now you can, because I wrote a book about it. But I was trying to get my mind around it all. And I asked him, how does this work? And he said that once you're compromised, it's like you're on a yacht. And it's a beautiful yacht, and it's a beautiful day, and you can have anything you want on the yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown. And that's what happens with our political system, is people are heavily compromised. And I think when a political system like the US, and I'm sure it happens in Canada too, becomes as compromised as ours, you end up with politicians that really are not fit to be leaders of democracies.
Yeah.
All right. So just to draw on your example, the yacht would be like what's on the yacht being offered would be what politicians can possibly provide for someone doing something for them. And if they chose not to play ball with the politicians, aka get off the yacht, they're going to be drowning.
Yeah, well, once you're compromised, you're on the yacht.
Yeah.
And there's zero incentive at that point to get off the yacht. And you're going to be able to do whatever you want to do once you're on the yacht. And it'll be covered up.
True. I just had a quick question about your mentor telling you about the Franklin story being potentially dangerous and whatnot. Did that change your approach in any way as far as doing what you do? Like, did you take any precautionary measures to, I don't know, either be extra vocal so if you, let's say you do get taken out, it's kind of obvious, or like did it change your approach in any way?
I hooked up with there were some people that I met that had connections to intelligence. And I was told there was 2 imperatives. I was told to replicate everything I have and disseminate it, and don't blackmail anybody. So that was, and I adhered to that. If I got some documents, I ended up with, there were 2 grand juries that were used to cover up the Franklin network. And with a grand jury, a special prosecutor is chosen, and the special prosecutor, grand jurors, I mean, a grand jury has that ring of like the gods of jurisprudence have spoken. I think only the US and Liberia, that bastion of democracy, are the only 2 countries that still have grand juries because they're so easily to corrupt. A special prosecutor is chosen to oversee a grand jury, and grand jurors are just people that have shown up for jury duty that have been funneled to a grand jury. And anything, whatever the special prosecutor wants, he's going to call the witnesses that he or she deems are appropriate and show the grand jurors the exhibits, the evidence that he or she deems appropriate, so they can really twist the grand jurors. And there was a New York Supreme Court judge, it's a famous quote, it said, special prosecutors of grand juries have so much power over grand jurors that they could get them to indict a ham sandwich. So
yeah.
I had like all these documents. I ended up with thousands of documents, and I ended up with lots of interviews. And I replicated all my documents. I put all the documents on PDF files and then tossed them to the four winds. And I did the same thing with my interviews. I put all the interviews on CDs, and I just gave them to everybody. So if something did happen to me, there'd be a counterbalance.
All right, and their problem wouldn't be solved. So
one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, so we've seen networks like Epstein, the Franklin scandal. We've seen this time and time again, and there was many before. Obviously, we talked about the Finders. There was North Fox Island with Francis Sheldon, Gerald Richards, and Adam Starfield, and then even over in, I think it was Belgium, the Dutroux murders, and then in Canada, we've had multiple billionaires and millionaires very recently, like in the last 2 years, arrested for being part of networks like this. So we had Frank Stronach, which should be the biggest story in Canadian news right now, because he's currently in trial and has been found guilty on several charges. But him, and then another, his name escapes me right now, but another one from Montreal. And we keep seeing this this kind of repeated pattern. Peter Nygard as well, another Canadian. Do you think, or has it ever crossed your mind that perhaps these are somehow all connected? And I understand some of them have happened at different times, but do you think it could be like an ongoing kind of network that happens, that they just kind of, rope these people in to the yacht, as you said, and kind of use that to get their way? And I guess also, who do you think is behind it?
I believe that there are networks like this that they're all over. I mean, you talked about Dutroux. There was a big scandal in Spain, Mexico. There's been all kinds of pedophilic network scandals. And I think that, and now don't get me wrong on this, I think that child abuse happens on every social strata. I mean, it happens to the rich, it happens to the poor. There's child abuse is part of every social strata, but the social strata that I have written about and with Epstein, that social strata generally molest children with impunity. And that's why I couldn't let go of the Franklin scandal, because I believed hundreds of kids have been molested with impunity. Who do I believe runs this? If you look at Francis Sheldon, that Fox Island network is huge.
Yeah, I've looked into that heavily.
And it was bigger than, I think it was bigger than Franklin. I think that Franklin was bigger than Epstein. Epstein was around twice as long. That the Franklin network was only around for like 10 years, maybe 12, whereas Epstein, I think, was trafficking kids for up to 25 years or so. Sheldon had been doing it for a number of years, and he ended up in an I think he like running an orphanage or buying an orphanage. He was from a very wealthy family in India. There's pictures of him with Indian kids sitting on his lap.
God.
It's nauseating. But how does the guys running Franklin, how does Epstein, how does Francis Sheldon get away with it? Because I believe that they're protected by intelligence. I mean, I think it's very obvious to people. If people read the Franklin scandal, there's definitely a intelligence connection. There were two primary pimps, Lawrence King and Craig Spence, and Craig Spence was definitely a CIA asset. And actually I wrote another book called Confessions of a DC Man, The Politics of Sex, Lies, and Blackmail. And it was about a guy who ran a gay escort service, and he provided Spence with gay escorts and other people that were affiliated with intelligence so they could blackmail closeted politicians.
Wow.
With the Franklin scandal and Epstein, I think that there's an abundant evidence that that's definitely intelligence. I would say with Francis Sheldon and Fox Island, the way that was covered up, and it was pinned on one guy, and he ostensibly committed suicide, but it was really poorly staged. I mean, it was obvious that was a pretty blatant cover-up.
Well, that tends to happen more often, I think, than not. But
absolutely. The thing about it is, the only reason why we know the name Jeffrey Epstein is because the Palm Beach police chief, Michael Ryder, nobody knows his name, but he is the hero in this story. He refused to back down from Epstein, and from investigating Epstein, because he saw that all these kids had been molested. And he wouldn't back, and he took a lot of heat. And he's a really good guy. And he pushed and he pushed and he pushed. And the case was eventually taken away from him. They were going to indict Epstein, and they had an arrest warrant for him. And they were going to indict Sarah Killen too, one of his henchwomen. And the Florida state attorney, Barry Krishner, took the case away from them and gave it to a grand jury. And as I said earlier, I was talking about grand juries, and the grand jury that at that point, I think that the Palm Beach Police Department, they had the statements of 5 victims, but they were aware of many more. And that special prosecutor, Lanabelle Lavick, cooked that grand jury. I mean, she called 2 kids. That was it. And then totally deconstructed them. And one of the kids had been molested when she was 14. She was now 16. And one of the kids had been molested repeatedly when she was 16. She was now 18. And she just destroyed them. And the grand jurors came back, said that not a single child had been molested by Jeffrey Epstein. And then when that when that grand jury verdict was unveiled, Michael Ryder went to the feds and he said, you guys have got to investigate this, because all these children have been molested. And the feds found, I've got a list that the feds had of 36 underage victims, but they knew of 40. And the FBI in Miami did a very good job of investigating and finding a lot of victims. But Alexander Acosta, who was the U.S. attorney, who was for the Southern District of Florida, he was told that he had to stand down because Epstein was intelligence. And he's since recanted that, but actually he's recanted a lot of things that have been very contradictory to his prior statements. But there's only 2 people in the U.S. government that can tell a U.S. attorney to stand down. One is the Attorney General and one is the President. And at that point, the Attorney General was Alberto Gonzales, and the President was George Bush too, the cognitively challenged George Bush. And so that order emanated from the pinnacle of the U.S. political system.
So when you say that the CIA, or we'll say intelligence, is involved, what does that mean? Because I think, it's easy to say intelligence is involved, but to what end? Do you think that they're entirely responsible for creating these rings, or do you think that they know of them and they allow it to happen for blackmail purposes? Like, what do you think is the extent of their involvement in it?
Or even possibly just achieving government policy regardless of who's in
Right.
office?
I mean, political blackmail isn't something that's
No.
new. And when Alexander Hamilton was having an affair with a 23-year-old woman who was married, and her husband was blackmailing him, and then a muckraking journalist came across the story, and he outed Alexander Hamilton for having this affair. And then he went to Jefferson, and Jefferson and Hamilton really had a lot of antipathy towards each other. And he went to Jefferson, and Jefferson had just become president. He was the third president. And the muckraking journalist felt that Jefferson owed him an appointment in his administration because he outed Alexander Hamilton. And Jefferson didn't give him an appointment. And then he outed Jefferson Jefferson had owned a slave. And according to DNA, there's progeny from Jefferson and that slave. Her name was Sally Hemings.
Wow.
So now it's very easy to blackmail people because you've got pinhole cameras. It's
Right.
high tech, and the CIA or some dark malignant corner of intelligence. When I say the CIA, I mean some dark malignant corner of our intelligence. It's power. It's all about power, and they have a tremendous amount of power. Americans don't really, as I said earlier, Americans have been conditioned to think that they can't affect change. And the
Canadians too. Sorry, Canadians too.
Yeah. And like with the lies that led to the Iraq War of the cognitively challenged George Bush, those lies were really disingenuous. And actually, they were being exposed on the internet in real time. So we went to war, and Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction. No heads rolled. The financial meltdown that where millions of Americans lost their homes and many lost their businesses, and just devastation. No heads rolled. Nothing happened. Edward Snowden comes out with those revelations about how Americans are being spied on. Nothing happens. The COVID virus is traced, a lot of people would argue, to the Wuhan lab, and the CDC and USAID was giving money to that particular lab. Nothing happened. No heads rolled.
Right.
So there's a reason why no heads rolled, and that's because our politicians are very controlled. Now, with these, the Oversight Committee is investigating Jeffrey Epstein, and it's just a dog and pony show. And the Oversight Committee didn't call Les Wexner to Washington, D.C. They actually went to Ohio to hold their hearing with Les Wexner. I mean, that should show you who has the power. And Les Wexner lied to them blatantly. He said that the last time he saw Jeffrey Epstein was 2006 or talked to him, and we've got emails from 2008. And Jeffrey Epstein gave Les Wexner $56 million in 2011. So I don't care how rich you are, you don't forget $56 million. These are lies that are very easy to prove. I mean, the New York Times wrote an article about the $56 million, and all you got to do is look at the emails that have been released, and you can see that Wexner had a dialogue with Epstein after 2006.
Well, Les Wexner
And-
is his, in my opinion, is his own brand of evil, and Epstein is not the only person in terms of sex trafficking that he's kind of been involved with. He was also involved with the Bronfmans, who are responsible or partially responsible for the NXIVM sex cult that happened in Vancouver, where they were trafficking. It was upwards of 16,000 people, women and children. So
good old Les.
Mhm.
And actually, he and Epstein were lovers, which is
What?
kind of a
Whoa.
yeah. He and Epstein were
I'm
lovers.
going to need you to expand on that one, Nick, because that's one I haven't heard yet.
Yeah, they had some kind of thing going on between them.
All right.
I've got that from a pretty good source. Actually, I was told about it from another source, but then I did get it from a pretty good
Wow.
source who I trust.
All right.
Well,
Well,
With
sorry,
Les,
go ahead.
I just want to finish this point with. So, Les Wexner has lied to the Oversight Committee, and the Oversight Committee knows that Les Wexner lied. Now we know that the Trump administration isn't going to indict anybody because the Trump administration has said that Epstein and Maxwell had no cohorts. So, but what these Democrats can do is put in referrals for indictments. They can put it on the record. If you lie to Congress, it's a felony and it's punishable by up to 5 years in prison. They can put it on record and say, this is a referral for indictment for Les Wexner because he said he lied about this. This is a referral for an indictment for Les Wexner because he lied about that. They're not even doing that. So it really shows you that it is a dog and pony show. Signifying nothing.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Alice Falling is brought to you by The Based Company. Check out our line of Awake t-shirts made in Alberta, Canada, and explore a world of hidden knowledge and declassified documents. Visit us at estunknown.co.
Nice. I was going to say, let's go back in the life of Mr. Nick Bryant. And so you finish up with the Franklin scandal. And what do you see when you look at Epstein? Do you see like the same blueprint that draws you to the story? That, like, how did you end up there? And then for those listening in Canada, Nick is the reason why we have Epstein's black book on the internet, or why we got it when we did. But yeah, just my question is like, what drew you to that? You saw the same formula, you wanted to continue?
Well, I didn't want to continue, that's for damn sure. But I spent 7 years on the Franklin scandal, and when it got published, I live in New York City, which is expensive. When it got published, I had about a year's worth of money, and I thought to myself, I can get something going with the Franklin scandal, either through Hollywood or boost its sales somehow, because I'm a pretty tenacious guy, and I'm like that. I'm not a plan B guy. I'm just not. I always make plan A work. Well, in this case, plan A did not work. And I ended up going through some really hard times financially. The Franklin scandal got published in 2009, 2010. And I went through some really, because we couldn't get anybody to buy it. And podcasts have evolved a lot since 2009, 2010. But for the most part, I was getting interviewed by people that had some psychological problems. I'll put it that way. And we couldn't, basically the story of the Franklin scandal is the story of Epstein. The government is covering up child trafficking. The government is aiding and abetting child trafficking. If you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting child trafficking. So No one wanted to hear that message at that point, and my family didn't. Well, my family really doesn't read anything I write, but they definitely stayed away from that one. And so I was really, I was in a tough spot financially, but I saw what had gone down in Florida because I knew that there were, you could read that there were multiple victims, and then that grand jury had said that Jeffrey Epstein hadn't molested a single child. So that same dynamic was being repeated from the Franklin scandal. And I felt like I had to go down there. I knew this universe very, very well at this point. And I really felt like it was some kind of moral imperative. And I was pretty exhausted. I really didn't want to investigate another network, but I went down to Florida. And I was down there for a while, and I ended up getting Epstein's Black Book. And in 2011, that's when I went down there, October of 2011. And that was a score. And that Black Book just opened up a whole vista for me. Of there's a lot of victims in the Black Book, and then the rich and powerful that are in the Black Book are kind of daunting. And so I got the Black Book, and I started calling victims first. Victims, Epstein used euphemism for victims. It was massages. So I started calling, and then I talked to, the first call was kind of strange. I talked to the mother of a girl that Epstein had molested when she was 13. And the mother asked the girl questions. I would ask the mother questions. She would ask her daughter questions, and then she'd reply through me. She wanted to protect her daughter, but she was willing to help me. And so she was 13. She said she was 13, which the cover story on Epstein was that the youngest one was 14. I've since discovered that they were actually kids younger than 10.
Oh my God.
With Epstein. And then I started calling, and then I talked to a woman that talked about being flown around and then flown to an island. And then I realized it's very similar to the Franklin network. It's these powerful
Yeah,
guys.
they always have an island, it seems.
Well, the Franklin guys didn't have
No,
an
they
island,
didn't. But Nygaard K and North Fox. Yeah.
So I came back to New York, and I thought that I mean I had the Black Book. I mean the house manager had stolen it and circled the guys that he said were perps, and I had probably under massages there's probably like 175 different people, and not all of them are underage girls, but a lot of them were. And I thought for sure I could sell it, but I couldn't. No one wanted to touch it. And finally in 2015, in the interim, I got the flight logs too. And then finally in 2015, Gawker was willing to publish it. And then the floodgates just opened. I think that we've taken 3 quantum leaps in our understanding of Epstein. I think the first one was probably my release of the Black Book and the flight logs. The second one was Julie Brown's articles in the Miami Herald. And then the third was the recent release of Epstein documents on January 30th.
With the release of the Epstein documents, has that changed anything for you? I mean, I have to believe you've gone through them. I know I spent countless hours going through them, searching for just anything and everything. And some of the stuff is horrific, but you know, how did that kind of change things for you? Because you've kind of been in this since before anybody really cared you were chasing it. And now, you know, it's out there.
Well, I knew that there were kids that were under 14 years old for sure. I knew that. And I knew that some of these pedophiles were very, very sadistic to these girls. And that was something that people didn't want to hear. But the Epstein files have certainly corroborated everything that I've said. And they've shown light on areas that I certainly didn't know about, but they've also corroborated everything that I've said. And I've taken some heat for saying that these girls were under 14 years old, and some of them were under 10. And the files have shown that Jeffrey Epstein was definitely, I mean, he was getting pics of 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds. So that has really, that's corroborated everything I've said.
Nick, how does it feel to know that that you're named in the Epstein files a lot?
Well, that was kind of strange. I wasn't anticipating that, but I'm named in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen emails from Leslie Groff to Epstein. You know, Nick Bryant's calling around again. He's a journalist, and that's got to be kind of surreal, no?
Yeah, well, that was kind of, I found it to be interesting. I started after I called a number of the victims, I started calling Epstein's inner circle, and nobody really picked up. But I did get a hold of Sarah Kellen, and Sarah Kellen tried to tell me a tale of woe of how mean the media had been with her, and I really couldn't co-sign that. And it was a relatively brief conversation. And when she found out that I was not going to be sympathetic to her plight, and at some point, we don't know who sent the first volley of emails, but someone sent an email to Epstein's inner circle. Everybody's name, the names aren't redacted except for the person that sent it, and it said that there's a journalist calling around, be aware, and then they had my picture of what I looked like. And then, yeah, Leslie Groff emailed Jeffrey Epstein a couple of times saying, you know, because I'd gotten fairly aggressive with calling people. So Leslie Groff had told Epstein to call me a couple of times.
Were you like that? That's getting awfully close to the sun. Were you ever worried for your life? You know, like after you released that book, or when you were calling around, how were you feeling at that time?
I went through the Franklin scandal, and I was going to do what I was going to do, and my adversaries were going to do what they were going to do. I could not really worry about what they were going to do. I mean, I could protect myself as soon as I got the black book, I made copies of it and sent it to the Four Winds. But when you're in an investigation like that, you've got to develop pretty thick skin, because you're dealing with pretty evil people. And I kind of had thick skin to begin with, but the Franklin scandal really made my resolve very steely. And I had been through all this with the Franklin scandal, the ups and the downs and the fear and the anger and all this stuff. So I really wasn't feeling a lot of emotion when I was investigating Jeffrey Epstein, because I'd already been through it before.
That's fair.
If I hadn't been through it before, then that probably would have been a different story.
That's an excellent mindset to have. Nick, I just want to get your opinion on a set of emails that got released in that drop that sparked my attention, specifically the one from Jeffrey Epstein to Peter Thiel, where he states, as you may know, I represent the Rothschilds. And then there's another set of emails going back between Epstein and Catherine Rumler, Obama's former advisor, where Epstein's pretty much getting her to negotiate a non-prosecution agreement for an Edmund de Rothschild bank pertaining to tax violations that bank might have had. So just that being said, and given like the scope of what was going on and the charges on Epstein, we're pretty much looking at someone, or Epstein himself, giving up who he works for. And nobody seems to care. Like, is it very that persona non grata to mention that last name when it comes to this investigation and this network, or is anybody talking about it behind the scenes? Your thoughts?
Well, the fact that Epstein was working for the Rothschilds was definitely, I mean, one of the Rothschilds is listed in the Black Book, but I'd heard that there was some antipathy between Epstein and that particular Rothschild, but maybe not, I don't know. But I think Epstein was involved working with a lot of different entities. There was a Palestinian hacking group called Handala that got a hold of a bunch of Ehud Barak's emails, thousands of them. And in those emails, Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein are putting together arms deals or cyber security deals. And they're working very closely with Israel. So you got the Rothschilds, you got Israeli intelligence, and Ehud Barak was the former prime minister of Israel for a couple of years, and then he was the defense minister for a number of years. And he and Epstein are working very closely with putting together these arms deals. And then I also believe that Epstein was working with the CIA too. When people think, well, Epstein's Mossad, I don't believe that the CIA, and I'm talking about the dark malignant corner of intelligence that does stuff like this, I don't believe that they would allow the Mossad to compromise American politicians on American soil without getting a cut of that intelligence. I just don't believe that.
How do you know that they're not, though?
Because when Epstein was indicted initially in 2007, as I said earlier, it was the president and the attorney general that quashed his case. So are they going to be doing that for a Mossad asset, or are they going to be doing that for a CIA asset? I think just intuitively, it strikes me that they would be doing that for a CIA asset rather than for a Mossad asset.
Well, I know that Ehud Barak had very close connections with the Bronfmans, who I had mentioned earlier, were very close with Les Wexner, and there was actually a scandal during his campaign where money was funneled through some, I guess it was Jewish charities, from the Bronfmans into his campaign fund. So, I mean, I teeter on whether or not I think he was Israeli intelligence or American intelligence. But then I also look at Robert Maxwell, and obviously he had very close ties with Ghislaine Maxwell, and there's stuff stating that Robert Maxwell worked for many different intelligence entities, I guess we will call them. So do you think it's possible Epstein could have been working for multiple people?
Yeah, like I said, I think that we've got those emails where he and Ehud Barak are putting together deals, but then we've also got the top of the American political establishment quashing Epstein's child abuse case. I think that the dark part of the Mossad and the dark part of the CIA are kind of like the Genovese and Gambino crime families. The Genovese and Gambino crime families found that it was really counterproductive if they were fighting each other. So now they work in conjunction with most of the things that they do. And I think that the dark part of the CIA and the dark part of the Mossad are just essentially organized crime families.
Yeah, that bill, that's what, I don't know much about it, what's going on, but that bill that's threatening to merge Israeli intelligence and American intelligence that's being voted upon right now would probably be a really good sign on what you just said right there.
Yes. I find that to be kind of mind-boggling that it's gotten that far, but that's where the world we're living in.
Yeah.
Nick, we want to just ask a couple audience questions. We kind of just put it out there to the audience for our podcast on whether or not they had any questions for you since we got the opportunity to have you on. So, Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you.
From Behold the Truth Holder, two-part question. I'd like to know, since Nick released that information, if whistleblowers, victims, or government officials came to him afterward to give him direct information about these people's involvement with Epstein. So I guess he's just asking if your sources are that legit.
Yes, I have gotten information from some very legit sources.
Perfect. And then next, his second part of that question was, have you been given information about what and who was caught on video in the act of, let's say, abusing these girls from the video footage FBI confiscated from the island or any other Epstein locations?
They confiscated multiple disks and 4 hard drives from his safe. And when people think of safe, they think of some kind of small thing. Epstein had a safe that was like the size of a closet.
Wow.
And all his homes were wired for audiovisual blackmail, all of them. And according to both Virginia Giuffre and Maria Farmer, Epstein showed them the secret room in his New York mansion. And there were 2 guys monitoring the monitors. And the monitors were focused on the bedrooms, all the bedrooms, and all the bathrooms. Wow. So whatever went down in a bedroom in that home or a bathroom, it was caught on tape. And 2 guys were monitoring it. So that's a conspiracy right there. And how could he not be blackmailing people? He's got these young girls, and he's got every room in his place wired for audiovisual blackmail. I mean, how could that not lead to blackmail?
Yeah. All right, and then we just got one more here before I guess we before you're going to tell us about your website and Epstein Justice. Amplified Gal mentions that she went to journalism school back when journalism was actual news reporting. And whether it be on this podcast or on previous podcasts you've been on, what's the one question you wish someone would have asked you that they haven't? If one exists.
I think that these investigations of mine have been so multifactorial that there isn't one definitive question that someone can ask me. I appreciate people just allowing me to talk about my experiences without kind of butting in. And you guys have been great about that, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, I don't think that there's one definitive question. I only took one journalism class in college, and I found it unbelievably boring. And I majored in philosophy. And when I was an academic, I was writing philosophic papers, and they were getting published in good journals, but nothing was happening because only people that were academics could really understand what I was writing. And then I started to moonlight as a journalist. And I was telling you guys before we started that I proved that there was a serial killer. I'm from Minneapolis. I lived in New York for 30 years. I proved that there was a serial killer in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, killing prostitutes. And that was rewarding for me because a task force was ultimately formed because of the article that I wrote. So I got into journalism kind of by just, it was a haphazard thing. And I didn't really like the academic environment that I was in, that I'd been in for about 5 years. So I continued writing articles I continued moonlighting as a journalist. And then I moved it to New York in 1995, and that I've been a freelance journalist ever since.
Well, I am a big fan of the work you've done. I have been down a human trafficking rabbit hole for several years now, and it's something that's pretty near and dear to my heart, and I do try to raise awareness as much as I can. So I very much appreciate the people like yourself that are out there kind of on the front lines, raising that awareness full time. And on that note, you are the director of Epstein Justice. And for everybody in Canada, because I think it's a bigger thing in the US than here, but if you can just tell everybody kind of what this is all about, what are you hoping to accomplish with it? I know you touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but I just kind of want to clear the way now for you to really talk about that and teach everybody.
Epstein Justice is a 501c3 that I started, and the associate director is Alicia Owen. And I met her in Omaha. She was she was trafficked when she was a kid, when she was an adolescent.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just about to ask that because I immediately recognized that name. That's amazing.
And Alicia, actually, I just talked to Alicia for about an hour today. She's a wonderful woman, but there were two kids. There were two bogus grand juries to cover up the Franklin scandal. And one was a state grand jury and one was a federal grand jury. And the FBI came in and really pressured these kids to recant. And Alicia wouldn't recant her abuse. And she was sentenced to, she was indicted on perjury, 8 counts from the state and 8 counts from the feds. So she was looking at 200 years. We're talking about a kid now. She's 18, 19 years old. And she's looking at 200 years in prison because she won't recant that she was molested by a bunch of sick, twisted, depraved rich people. And there's a kangaroo court. The chapter in the Franklin scandal where I get into her courtroom battle is the biggest chapter, and she was sentenced between 9 and 15 years for 9 to 15 years in prison for perjury, and the authorities really tried to destroy her. They put her in solitary confinement for 2 years, and she is an associate director of Epstein Justice, and I really have just deep respect, and I love Alicia a lot. But what we're doing is we have a webinar, and maybe you could put the address for the webinar. I can send it to you. We have webinars once a month. We have a Facebook page. We have a petition that has over 91,000 signatures at this point. And ultimately what we're doing is we're putting pressure on the politicians to vote for an independent congressional commission. And independent congressional commissions can completely decouple themselves from the political process and have an actual investigation with integrity. Because what we're seeing now, the investigation of the Oversight Committee isn't being conducted with integrity. And that's our goal, is an independent congressional commission, and it would have two objectives. We want to know why the government covered up child trafficking, and we want the perpetrators to be prosecuted. It's pretty simple baseline morality. And as I said earlier, Americans are conditioned to believe that they can't affect change. And then you've got this right-left dialectic, which leaves the populace open to basically divide and conquer, which is truly unfortunate. But we're trying to bring everybody together with this. And children being molested with impunity, if that can't bring the right and left together, nothing is going to bring the right and left together. I think that this is the only issue that can actually unite the right and the left, that children shouldn't be molested with impunity. So I'm confident about this. I started working on the Franklin scandals 23 years ago, and I've written a lot about child trafficking. I've spoken at a lot of conferences. I've given many, many interviews over the years on child trafficking, and we're never going to be able to eradicate all child trafficking. It's just not going to be possible. According to the Centers for Disease Control, 25% of American girls and 5% of American boys have been molested when they were underage. And if you go with those numbers, and people in the field think it's slightly conservative for girls and extremely conservative for boys. But if you go with just the CDC numbers, you've got over 50 million Americans who have been molested when they were minors. And what makes the Epstein case, there's a number of things that were why we need justice in the Epstein case. We need to clean out our government, a government that's covering up child trafficking and kids getting molested. I mean, it needs to be fixed. I mean, that is a government that can no longer adequately serve the American people. That's just the bottom line. But you've got more than 50 million Americans who have been molested as minors, and most of them are not going to see justice. But if they see justice fail in the Epstein case, they are going to lose all hope that they can possibly have justice. So the Epstein case is really important. It's really important for our society to clean out the pollution of our current political system. And it's really important for victims of sexual abuse to see that Epstein, people will be prosecuted for Epstein. Mm-hmm. That's really important. And Epstein Justice is the only organization out there that has a plan. There's an organization out there called World Without Exploitation that has a number of Epstein survivors. But I wrote an article about World Without Exploitation. You can read it on Zero Hedge, and I get into the World Without Exploitation and how they're funded, and it's a very suspect organization.
What makes you say that?
The woman who founded World Without Exploitation, she was caught suppressing evidence.
Wow.
In a case, and when she was an assistant district attorney, and she went up before a ethics panel, and she resigned 4 hours later. But the World Without Exploitation received a lot of money from Reid Hoffman, and millions actually. And Reid Hoffman was definitely an Epstein crony, if not an Epstein perpetrator. And there's this umbrella organization called TIDES, the World Without Exploitation. Epstein Justice has to file 501. We're a 501c3, so we have to file 990s. And all 501c3 organizations have to file 990s with the IRS to show that we're in compliance. But they don't file 990s because they're in partnership with TIDES or sponsorship with TIDES. I forgot the exact language that they used. And TIDES gets money from USAID, the Ford Foundation, Open Society, Gates Foundation. And actually, there are a number of Epstein perpetrators that have given millions of dollars to TIDES.
Wow.
And this is where this organization is getting a lot of its money. And I showed that they, because the Super Bowl is, I believe, on February 8th, and those documents were released on January 30th, and they opened up and they showed exactly what Reid Hoffman was about. Reid Hoffman was about helping his friend Jeffrey and whitewash his predations, and they were very good friends. And to take money, if Reid Hoffman offered Epstein Justice $10 million, we'd turn it down. We wouldn't take any of Reid Hoffman's money.
Wow.
Because he's a complete scumbag.
It's just so crazy
And
to
I'm
hear
amazed
this.
that I got that article published. I mean, because the two women that run that organization are attorneys, and they're heavily financed by TIDES and other. And then Reid Hoffman is a billionaire. I'm kind of. It's one of those articles where you just don't know if you're going to get it published or not.
Wow.
But Epstein Justice, we are a very grassroots organization. We do not know the billionaire class. We do not have connections to the Epstein class. But what we do believe in is doing the right thing. And we have a plan now, and it's not going to be easy because we're going to need a majority in the House and the Senate to get this independent congressional commission. And people told me that'd be possible, but we saw that a majority in the House with that discharge position with Massey and Rocana, and ultimately that flipped it. So everybody voted for release of the files. I mean, and the Trump administration has lacked veracity about and hasn't followed the letter of the law. But what we want will circumvent the political system, and it's going to be hard. But this is a fight that's worth fighting. I mean, labor rights. When people started striking in the early 1900s, the government would actually send in the military to shoot them. Wow. or else they would hire the mafia to beat up the protesters. But ultimately, what happened there was unions, and unions have helped a lot of people. The laws have whittled away at unions in the United States. I don't know how it is in Canada, but the civil rights battle was tough. I mean, that was a very tough battle, and it was won. Women's rights, that was a tough battle, and it was won. LGBTQ rights, that was a tough battle, but it's won. This is the next battle that our society has to fight, and because our politicians, in addition to being on the yacht, they're making laws that are causing the disintegration of the middle class. And the wealth polarization in the United States has never, ever been the way it is now. And our politicians are essentially throwing the middle class off a cliff. And that's one of the things that made America so great was that you could come here and work hard and get a good job, get an education, get a good job, buy a house. Kids graduating from college now would have a very hard time buying houses, and this has all been stacked against us by our politicians. And it's very simple. If people see a law that they don't like and they're Republican, they blame it on the Democrats and vice versa. And this is an issue, as I said earlier, that can bring both the right and the left together. That's what makes it so important. And your audience can go to epsteinjustice.com. If you want to get involved, you can get involved. There's a petition. We got a webinar next Tuesday night that's going to be really good. It's with Cullen Brown. And although you're Canadian, you can certainly get involved with Epstein Justice.
I was going to ask. I would absolutely love to be involved with this and help however I can. Nick, can anybody join the webinars, just for anybody listening?
Absolutely. Okay. And there is a link floating around, but I will send you a link that you can disseminate to your audience.
Yeah, we'll make sure to have that at the bottom of every platform this goes up on.
Yeah, the plan is to have this released on. So we release our episodes on Sundays. So we're going to have it out this coming Sunday, and we will make sure that we've linked everything for everybody. And hopefully there's lots of people that want to get involved. I know I definitely do. Nick, your books, you've written so much. Where can people find your books? Where can people support you? Do you have a Patreon? What do you have?
I do have a Patreon. I had a podcast up until I started Epstein Justice, and I just couldn't do them both simultaneously. It was taking too much out of me. But yes, I do have a Patreon, and but if people want to donate, they can go to epsteinjustice.com and donate. That would be far better than giving money to my Patreon.
Fantastic. And your books, Nick, where can they find those?
My books can be found wherever books are sold. You can find my books.
Fantastic. I can tell you for sure he is on Audible. I've been listening to his wonderful voice tell me the Franklin scandal again. So anybody that listens to audiobooks, it's there.
And I just had a book come out on audio I wrote a book about Watergate. The Truth About Watergate, a story of extraordinary lies and liars. And it really goes against the Watergate narrative that people have been brought up to believe.
I was actually, sorry, go ahead.
At the heart of Watergate is a CIA blackmail operation,
sexual
blackmail operation that people, it's been kind of conveniently written out of history, but there's been some really good books about it.
I was listening to you talk about the Watergate stuff with Sean Ryan, so I'm excited to read that one. I have not read that one yet. For anybody that hasn't read the Franklin Scandal, I highly recommend it. Just an absolutely awesome book. Nick, any final thoughts for you before we kind of close it off?
No, I'm good. I just, you can visit epsteinjustice.com. If you want to go to my website, it's nickbryantnyc.com. And visit both websites, and I'm sure you'll find information there that you'll find edifying.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. Dave, any last thoughts for you?
No, Nick, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Honestly, the world would be a better place if there was more Nick Bryants in it. So thank you.
And the world would be a better place if there was more Canadians too.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, hopefully we'll talk to you down the line once Epstein Justice makes some arrests and gets things done.
Okay,
Nick, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'd love to have you back, maybe in 6 months or so, just to touch base with you again on kind of what's going on with Epstein Justice. I hope I get to talk to you more and get involved with that. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, have a great night, you guys.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Alice Falling is brought to you by The Based Company. Check out our line of Awake t-shirts made in Alberta, Canada, and explore a world of hidden knowledge and declassified documents. Visit us at estunknown.co.
Alice falling down the rabbit hole.